By way of introduction, my name is Melissa. I'm a first-year MBA student at Kellogg School of Management and part of the DECODE team who'll be moderating tonight's session. For those who are new, I'd love to give you a little bit more background on what DECODE is about. DECODE is the largest tech and innovation forum, jointly hosted with UC Berkeley and Stanford student organizations, alumni networks, and entrepreneurship centers. The organization features speakers at the forefront of technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship from around the world. The mission of DECODE is to give students, founders, and investors a platform to share, connect, and be inspired. Over the past 5 years, our annual DECODE Innovation Conference have had over 10,000 audiences every year. And then some of our notable speakers include founder and CEO of Zoom, board member of Tesla and SpaceX, CEO of Y Combinator, and CEO of Google X. Our most recent conference last October had garnered 1.3 million views across 44 countries and have thus prompted us to kick off this speaker series, with today being, I think, our 4th or 5th session. Our next speaker will be in 2 weeks on March 24th. With Keith Enright, who is Google's Chief Privacy Officer. So definitely stay tuned for more details on that. And on to the logistics for today's event. I see that Carin has joined us. So after Carin's presentation tonight, there will be a Q&A session, and you can send in any questions that you have for a speaker via the Zoom chat, and we'll try to go through as many questions as possible. And I'd love to give you an intro on Carin by way of background. Carin is a published researcher and co-author of Compassionate Management of Mental Health in the Modern Workplace. She also helps Harvard Business School's faculty write cases and think about how to build better organizations. This has led her to the topic of mental health and her 2019 book on compassionate management of mental health in the modern workplace. For the past year, she has been writing and talking about COVID's impact on employee well-being and company responses, including the launch of many new companies. Carin is an MBA graduate from Harvard Business School. Without further ado, let's welcome Carin. Carin.
Thank you, Melissa, for the introduction, and congratulations on starting your MBA. It's a great degree. I'm very happy to be here tonight. So I have some slides. I gather that given the speakers that you're used to and the caliber of people on the call, you're probably very driven and eager for information. So I have a lot of slides. It's an enormous topic. I'm going to start by saying that I'm here, after the session, and also to please talk to me in the chat. It's a lot nicer to just interact. We can wait till the end for Q&A also, but just make sure that that I really want to be having a conversation. So as I mentioned, we'll go through a lot of things. I thought that as we all rush all the time, then maybe we should take just a couple of minutes to think about the dates. So tomorrow will be the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic. I know it's been on everybody's mind. 2.6 million lost, every single country except a handful have been impacted. And I think that one way to think about tonight and a reflection tomorrow is how can we honor those whose lives we've lost and whose livelihoods have been upended by trying to build in a better way. So that's what really I think the business of mental health is about. I think the pandemic has given us a chance to rethink how we think about mental health. Melissa mentioned that our book came out in 2018. We actually started research in 2015. And we would go to managers and companies and say, why are you worried about cutting $2 on toilet paper when a third of your people are idling at work? And at the time, people just would not want to engage with us. There's stigma, there's a whole host of reasons. There are also legal reasons. And so then the pandemic came along, and all at once, that changed. And now we're sort of gone from one extreme to another. And there's, too much, a little bit too much, too many people in this space, a lot of innovation that we'll talk about. So I have a few slides that I will share with you guys. And again, as I mentioned, we can I'll walk through them and sort of share some of my ideas. Please do interrupt me as I go along. So as we've discussed, I do think this is the best of times and the worst of times for mental health. In mental health, we often think of stressors that then precipitate evolutions. I mean, nothing is normal about today's stressors. Regardless of what today is and feels like for many of us, the issue was difficult before, and we didn't have good systems, we didn't have good infrastructure before. It's certainly not going to go away. So there are a few things on the regulatory environment that has changed that we can talk about when we get into business innovation. I think it's the best of times because humanity will be forever changed by this experience. We have realized how fragile we are. I think we've realized also how interdependent you are. And I think, especially for the younger people on this call, I think this should give you a chance to sort of rally around what is your purpose for being. There are many reasons why we go through every day, but trying to learn from this moment, I think would be a wonderful opportunity. So from the information that I got, about a third of you already use apps, and a third of you are interested in or working in this space. So it's wonderful to be talking to an educated audience. I do think that your generation will change the world. I'm going to start with very basics, which is a basic understanding of terms. So what I found from working in this space is that everybody has a different interpretation of what mental health and mental illness is. And much like the very important words in our lives, like diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging, mental health, it's very important, especially if you're working in a company, or if you intend to work there, or even for yourself, to have definitions that are clear against which you can then measure your progress. So, mental health enables you to deal with the normal stressors of life, which means, it is not necessarily being Zen. It is not necessarily being, highly anxious. You can be highly anxious and be able to go through your life. Mental illness is really a condition that affects your ability to deal with life and to deal with relationships. So what is happening now is that you have the term sort of mental health, mental illness, mental disorder, well-being, all being tossed around at the same point. So when you find yourself in these conversations, try to drive for some clarity for yourself and for others. The first recommendation that is related to sort of going back to basics is that it's astonishing how little we actually know about our brain. And so here too in mental health, I think we tend to go sort of what is the solution, and before we understand sort of what is happening. We learn how to read and write in school, and in American schools you have sex ed, but there's really no time in our lives where we are actually educated on how our brains function. So this is just an encouragement on my part. I have here a couple of things that I think are really interesting to remember. The brain is 3 pounds only of our bodies. But for every heartbeat, 20% of the blood goes to it. It is absolutely central. Has 100 billion neurons, which then go connect to many more. And there are 100 neurotransmitters, and the transmitters are there to excite, sort of get us to something, inhibit, which is sort of hold us back, some of the depressing ones, and then the regulation is just to be regulated. So there are key neurotransmitters, which I have listed in the slides, and we'll send them along. Spend a little bit of time. I think it's really worth it. And at the end, I'll have a few resources of researchers who have been very good in the pandemic to share their insight in this thing, that you can go and learn about how they function. A very important thing to remember about the brain is that it is shaped early, and especially childhood trauma. So the expression in the field is neurons that wire together, fire together. So we do wind up, with a lot in life that has been dealt when we were very young, and sort of the brain is then constantly recalling. Every time it recalls something, it combines, it rewires itself again. And this is also how self-sabotaging behavior comes about. So if there is an investment that there is to make, especially in ed tech, maybe is in early childhood development, because once a child experiences severe trauma, then it's very difficult to emerge. The other thing besides informing yourself is to sort of think of your brain as a car. So one is to read the instruction manual and really remind yourself of what we might have learned in biology, what we might have learned in pre-med, but sort of look at it as if it were your instruction manual. And then much as a car needs maintenance, do the work and do the maintenance. If not, it will come back to get you. My second and related piece of advice is, to be a better listener to yourself. So I remember a few years ago, the pursuit of happiness became all the rage, especially in the US. And I remember thinking at the time that I would be worried. I am European. I am not very effusive. And, I didn't want to have to feel that I was happy every day. And I thought if we're all aiming for a form of happiness that is really elusive, then those of us who aren't in that category would then feel inadequate. And I think that it's been difficult now to sort of have a notion of how you are to behave and what is good. So what happens is that if you always think that you need to be happy, then you will engage in a lot of behavior to dull the pain. And, it can be social media, just, one more shot of dopamine, I'll check my, my phone just one more time. It can be anger at, people who have a different political view from yours. And then, of course, substance use disorders. And recently, Susan David wrote a book that I would actually recommend called on Emotional Agility, which is encouraging you to think of your emotions, not as directives. So it is not because you are sad that it is something that, drives your life. It's also data. So it is giving you a point, which is if you are bored at work, then the solution may not be to entertain yourself on your phone or drink more. It may be to actually listen to this emotion and then change what you're doing. So think of your emotions as data. And much as you are, constantly seeking data at work to make better decisions, don't deny yourself the ability to be your own, do your own data processing. For those of you who joined us a little bit later, please put questions in the chat, interrupt me. I really would like to be interactive and useful. In addition to learning about, the brain, and in addition to sort of trying to figure out, we also know from research that there are key inflection points at which time mental health disorders tend to set in. So it may be that I have had a tendency for depression. It may be that I have a tendency for anxiety, but usually they come to a front when we have inflection points. So one thing that you can do as a manager for yourself and also, in a startup or even in a freelance environment, and for your friends, is to pay attention to these key inflection points. So many are fairly obvious. Anything that involves a change in roles really is very stressful to humans. So it's divorcing, which is, I am no longer a partner. I am no longer in my social circle. I have to sort of figure out who I am in absence of the others. And then you do become sort of back into yourself. Another one is parenting. So having children is a great joy. I'm sure your parents are very, very blessed to have you, but it is also very stressful because there too you have a change in your relationship. Caregiving. I had my mother at home. My mother was a paraplegic. And, it's a different kind of stress, but it's also extremely difficult. And there, self-care is very important if you can pay attention to the people around your life who are going through that. And then, of course, the loss of loved ones. And in COVID, we've all gone through a process of grieving. So if you remember what you might have felt like at the beginning of the pandemic, we've gone through sort of anger, denial. Now we're sort of moving back towards acceptance. But grief is absolutely a major one. And there too, it's okay to be a little bit sad, but it is not, it is dangerous not to address it. Then there's a whole host of other ones which are professional. And so one of them is a promotion or any big change. So that's also a good time to watch out for yourself. Usually when you have a promotion, you will change your relationships with people around you. So you might have been peers before, and then all at once you have to be someone's boss. It's a very different feeling. And also you used to always know what it would be better for the boss to do, but then now you are the boss and realize that it was actually not that easy what she was trying to do. Then there's expatriation. I think a lot of us on the call, have moved countries. You don't feel quite right. You have to sort of figure out who you are. You're pining for the old identity, trying to develop a new one. And of course, layoffs, anything that is traumatic like that. For layoffs, what is interesting is not just to watch out for the people who have been laid off, but also to watch out for the people who have remained. So many of us are in organizations, at least those of us in the call who are outside of the school, but even academic institutions have felt the squeeze of COVID. And the people who remain have guilt, and the people who remain usually have to take out over other people's work, which then adds to the burden. So we all broadcast microsignals. It's a lot easier to figure this out in the real world. They tend to be sort of tardiness, changes in appearance, missed deadlines. But if you observe in yourself or in others a change in pattern of behavior, so somebody who might have been extremely responsive to email is not responding anymore. Somebody who is starting to miss deadlines, but never missed deadlines. So one good thing I think that has come with the pandemic is to say that people are now a little bit, I think, more willing to say, hey, I'm having a bad day, I'm struggling. And certainly as managers, we all should really try to sort of give people the space to give us warning about when they're not going to make it. But changes in patterns, and sometimes they're very difficult to see, are usually a good indicator. You can also scan your emails, for example. So I actually went back to my emails 3 months ago, and I've noticed that my tone has changed on email. And so I am getting tired in the pandemic. I can realize that. So try to do these scans with yourself. I see that there's a question in the chat. Let me see. Oh, Osho, do you want to tell me what it is? Oh, an edtech startup. Interesting. Okay, so if that's okay, Alexia, I'll answer this in a little bit. Let me know if you're going to be off the call, and then I'll do it earlier. So we talked about the inflection points. Another useful framework that I wanted to share with you guys is this notion of 3 outs. There's a lot of attention being put on burning out. It's been in the press. We feel that we can understand it a little bit more. It tends to come when the tasks are not well tailored to your work. So there's a misunderstanding often between employers and employees about sources of stress. So most employers think that a great source of stress is long working hours, but the employees will say, I'm very willing to work very hard. If you design the tasks that are tailored to the skills that I have, or if I don't have the skills, that you will give me the skills in order to do the task. So often it's a failure in management. And, they say that people leave managers, they don't leave companies. So burning out tends to be a mismatch between, what is asked of you and what you're capable of giving. Sometimes we put ourselves in these situations. It sort of sets off behavior that I think a lot of us have been going through in COVID, which is, you start to work too much, then you compensate, you really want to feel valued, you find yourself overworking, it becomes even harder. And sooner or later, people really have to take a time out. I think the second one is boring out. And so when you look at the stats, the number of us who are going through the motions of every day, we are not out on leave, we are not out on sick leave, we're not taking mental health leave, but we are just at work going through the motions, or just in our marriages going through the motions, in our friendships going through the motion. So being present without being really involved. We call this boring out in the book. It could be not having too much to do. And it could also lead to distraction. And of course, we have seen in COVID, it's extremely difficult to monotask. Everybody's always multitasking. But I do think this leads to a form of boring out because you're no longer really paying attention anywhere. And then you become immediately bored. The third one, which I think is really relevant to the new generation or your generation, is sensing out. So you may have perfectly tailored tasks. You may have just the right level to do. But if you're working for an organization whose mission you do not abide by anymore, or if you feel that you're disconnected from, your peers, then people sort of check out or become disenchanted, and there you can have some issues. So look out for these 3 in yourselves. We tend to lump them all together, but they're quite different. And the answer or the solution, there's never really a solution, but the way to manage them are also quite different. And you can look at them in others also. I know that several of you are in startups or interested in startups. And so I thought that I would spend a few moments, and we can do that also in the Q&A. And again, we'll share the slides. So I just want to share sort of high level. We spend a lot of time sort of focused on big companies, especially at Harvard and maybe on the East Coast. But soon half of us will be freelancers. The gig economy is here to stay. COVID really accelerated this. And 90% of companies are actually very small. So when you think of the investments that have been done in companies to help individuals with mental health, they tend to be less available to smaller companies. and yet at the same time, they're even more important. So I'll just tease this thing out, and I think it'll be intuitive. And then we can get to what it actually means for you as startup founders, for you as investors also, and for you as partners of individuals or friends in turnover. So, there are fewer resources, of course, in a startup or a smaller company. I work for Harvard Business School. We have an employee assistance program. I have, 12 sick days, 3 mental health days, a lot of vacation days. I can take a mental health leave. There's an ombudsman. So when I think of the portfolio of support that I have compared to a friend of mine who's in a startup, it's night and day. And the level of stress, I might have a level of stress, but it's very different to experience this stress also with steady employment. So what happens is that when you do not have these outside providers, I mean, the inside outside providers or the benefits, is that basically your supervisors and your coworkers become emotional, emergency responders. And none of us are trained for this. So most of us had to become this in COVID, but in addition to everything that is going on. Then, of course, you're in an environment where not only do you not have, the backup of a big company, but your ego, your career, your family and friends are all invested in this succeeding. And the people who would usually be your support mechanism, so I could go to my husband and say, I'm really stressed today, I don't think the company's going to make it. He might have a very different reaction if it's, Harvard going bankrupt versus if it's our whole life savings and the savings of our kids and our mortgage going through there. So we did some research in the book, about entrepreneurs. So, 50% have one or more mental health conditions. So, the stats, a quarter of us will have a mental health issue in our lifetime, but it's twice the control group for depression and 10 times the control group for bipolar disorder. The very tricky thing with mental health, and we just wrote a couple of cases on athletes, for those of you who are athletes, on Michael Phelps and Vladimir Klitschko, is that sometimes our pathologies really drive us to success. So athletes will work out because as kids, they struggled maybe with depression. They are highly driven, quite monomaniacal, and this will lead to great success. The problem is that when the rush stops, then now there's a lot being written, and maybe The Weight of Gold is a movie that I would highly recommend, done by the Michael Phelps Foundation. He's been very involved in trying to help on this front, especially in COVID. And then a fifth of startups, of the startups that fail, a fifth are due to burnout or loss of focus. So it comes at a big cost. So what are the options? One option is, when you go into this field, just to be very conscious of it, it's also a field that rewards, like the military or the police or even the medical field, being strong, sleeping faster, I'm going to be okay. But think about, who is going to be your backup? What is the plan B? To whom will you go? With whom can you speak openly? And maybe have an honest conversation when you are looking at VCs or funders about, what is your intent about the kind of organization that you want to build for yourself, and especially for the others. As a VC and NP, think of services that you could provide to your portfolio companies. So it may be that a particular investment cannot really afford an EAP, but they're bundled services. We're going to talk about apps in a little bit. Is there something that you can provide across your portfolio companies that will enable them to succeed? It will hedge your bets financially a little bit when you look at the stats, and also enable them to learn from each other. But any questions or anything? No? Okay. So this leads us to the other flip side. The title of our time together is, mental health. The business of mental health is, everyone's business. So it's everyone's business because, it relates to all of us as individuals. As I mentioned in the beginning, I think it's everyone's business because society really needs us to pay attention now to human sustainability issues. It's everyone's business in a big corporation, but it's also a phenomenal now business opportunity. And so there's been investment in this field, and we can talk about this a little bit in the Q&A if that's of interest. So there are 10,000 as of end of December. There were 10,000 mental health apps available in the US. I think for about only 10% of them is real scientific backing. So there's been an absolute flood and rush into this space. A big challenge also with mental health is that, the medications don't work. So for many of them, they only have a 15 to 28% success rate. There's a placebo effect. There's also a placebo effect with these mental health apps. So I'm not saying that they are not good, and I'm not a clinician, but from what I have read about their, the scientific background of a lot of them, they aren't necessarily steeped in deep science. So please be careful when you use them, to investigate. There's three sort of big modalities that we've seen emerging in this field. So one is therapy via video conversation. So a lot of therapy remains speaking based. So one of the famous ones at Talkspace, Headspace, there's been a lot of these. I think it's fantastic in many ways, because one of the great issues in mental health is that we have a shortage of suppliers and lack of access. So lack of access is in part because of, it's difficult to take time off from work. You don't have the funding. It also used to not be reimbursed, especially for telemedicine, until the CARES Act last year, which really led to a boom in teletherapy of all kinds, but has been a real blessing in terms of mental health, and of course the Mental Health Parity Act. The other one is coaching services, well, non-directly mental health related. And then there's, the advent of these AI-informed chat therapy and insights. So Ginger has done very, very well, and they will sort of respond to you. And, I have several friends who use them and swear by them. So you've seen interest in investing in sort of these different modalities. Another way to think of investing in this field is, do you want to invest in something that is like sleep or movement? So do you want to have a vertical and really focus on that? Or do you sort of want to go to the horizontal, which is what is the behavior that you're trying to tackle? So I think you've seen a real matrix of this. The reimbursement on these really drives the business model that you'll choose. Each of these has pros and cons, which we can also discuss later. One is insurer reimbursement. So will Medicare pay for it? Will maybe your employee or your employer pay for it? Then how do you negotiate with big companies if you are the provider? So one version is, per employee per month. So you've seen a lot of companies sort of rush into offering these. Some have had very low uptake, but they're still being billed per employee per month. So can you build an annuity? And then the third is, direct to consumer. So can you have enough of a critical mass of people signing up to your app and staying there? So the staying there is really important. The churn on these apps is enormous, because what happens is people get on, they try for a little bit, it doesn't work. So the customer acquisition costs for these mental health apps are really, really high. And then the higher the churn, the less you're able to prove that it actually works. So it will impair your business model and your ability to eventually, qualify for insurer reimbursements. So if you're thinking about developing an app in that space, it is a really crowded space. Think of, the modality, think of the vertical versus, the horizontal, and of course, who's going to pay for it, which is something you always think about everywhere, but especially in healthcare. So the funding, we've all read about, a lot of rushing into this space. I speak with, some friends of mine who are in this space on the VC side. I think we are sort of over the hump, and I think that now a little bit of the hope is going to fade, and also that there's just too much crowding in this space. Remains a big business. The pandemic is going to leave lasting impacts. I think especially on young kids, it is now getting visible. We've all read the horrifying information about suicidal ideation. So something that is related to children, I think, has a lot of potential. Also older people. So in addition to these modalities, you can also think of the segments that you may want to work on. So all that being said, there's a lot of apps. We've seen the employees sort of reacting with, people wanting a better mental health, saying, well, here's an app, here's this. I've sort of shared one thing that is just the people analytics tool. So one thing is you're going to sell apps to employers. One thing is you're going to use the apps, but also how will you tell that it actually works? So you've seen a lot of investment in the development of people analytics, and people sort of go through them and say, oh, my people are a little bit happier. Again, not really defining what happiness sort of means, how you would actually go about it. So at the end of the day, I think, I'm going to end where I started, which is there's a lot of technology out there. There's a lot of approaches, but it really just starts with you as a manager, with you as a friend, with you as a founder. So there are different things that are emerging in this field. So I didn't want to spend too much time on things that I think everybody knows about, the cognitive behavioral theory, the dialectical, hypnosis and all of that. I wanted to encourage you all to try to reconnect with the physical world in a way at this juncture of the pandemic. I mean, our world has become so unreal. I mean, I'm connected to you guys through the information superhighway. It feels so strange that, we cannot feel each other. And so there's been a real boom in the exploration of art and music therapy. And anything that connects you, and Sho and I were talking about this before, anything that connects you to expressing and connecting to yourself in a different way. There are lots of resources. Again, if you're interested, please ping me on LinkedIn or find me about ways that, we can get in touch with and really find some solace into the world. Music therapy is the same. And then, of course, ketamine and psychedelics. I think we're really in the time when we're willing to explore the brain in a very different way. The pandemic has also been good because I think it's released a lot of information for you guys. So I just listed a couple of people that I follow. And if you listen to a couple of their videos, I also have a lot of articles and things to share that's useful. But Tom Bilyeu does a lot of behavioral interviews. So he tends to have athletes, people who were substance use abusers, who will come on and sort of share with you tricks that they have used and approaches that they have. Andrew Huberman is actually out of Stanford. Some of you might know. He explores the connection between vision and the brain. So, we are visual beings. I think half of the brain's actually developed to vision. And another challenge that we're now having with our worlds that are very narrow, especially with us always being on our phones, is that we lose connection to the outside world, which is why, going out into space, leave your phone at home, just go around the block for, 5 minutes, go out and look at the sunset, anything that enables the eye to sort of relax a little bit, because hyper-focus, which is what we're all doing now, signals to the brain that you're under stress. So some of the stress that we've been feeling from the advent of phones and also the pandemic is that our field of vision has narrowed. I think he's quite fascinating, and he's decided in the pandemic to make his content free, like many of us are doing. I already mentioned Susan David about, emotions are data. I think she's fantastic. She's on this coast. And then I included two women that personally have moved me. So Edith Eger, who wrote The Gift, which is about mourning, is a Holocaust survivor. And she goes through how do you take a moment like COVID and decide to not let it guide you, and that it will give you a chance to lead a different life. She's also on talks. And then finally, a lot of stress and support comes from relationships. So much as we can understand our brain, learning a little bit more about how you have productive relationships, especially with close loved ones. There I would recommend a woman called Esther Perel. She's also quite entertaining. You can listen to all of these on 1.5 speed playback so that you get through it faster. But these are a couple of people I thought that I would share with you guys. So where do we go from here? It's I think one good decision out of the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic is to get into a practice or decide on something that you would do for yourself, which is what we've talked about, and check in a little bit more regularly. Sort of look at yourself as you would a friend, as you would a colleague. Sort of take yourself out of your own self and say, I wonder how she's doing. What am I observing in her behavior? For others, checking in with others, it makes a huge difference. We talked about inflection points. On the last point I have, just asking people, how are you? A lot of this advice seems really simple-minded. It is extraordinarily difficult to do. It is really difficult to do well. It's like an omelet, it's the simplest dish in the world, but it is the dish by which, chefs are rated because there's very few ingredients, but actually pulling them off. And then once you ask a person, how are you doing, take the time to answer. which I know everybody's rushing and it's extremely, extremely difficult, but small actions can go a very long way. If a friend hasn't been in touch, reach out, try to pay attention to, whose voice has changed. We really can practice mental health for all and by all. And I think this is really what is asked of the pandemic. And I'd love to hear what other people have done in that respect. So a self-reflection that I wanted to share with you all is, as you've listened to me talk, I hope that you've noticed that you have some preconceptions about mental health and that you have some preconceptions about how you are to the topic, how you behave with yourself and with others. In the book, we interviewed many, many managers and we classified them by animal type. And so when you think of yourself, do you tend to, when you see, for example, somebody in your team, or let's say you have a group project, you see that somebody is in trouble, is your instinct to protect and carry along? All of these has pros and cons. So if you protect somebody, you might give them the chance to, sort of find a solution and heal, but you might also just be postponing an issue and then not helping in the end. There is a personality type by which if you see that anybody exhibits any weakness, you will confront it. Then there's the ostrich approach, which is I'm just going to pretend that this is not happening. So as you go through your life and think about how you can participate yourself in solving this mental health pandemic that is upon us, is take a little bit of time to listen to the story of what you're bringing to this. So for example, we may have a personal experience. Let's say my father was an alcoholic. If I have an employee at work who is an alcoholic, I may behave in a very different way because I think I know how this person is feeling. I think I know how to manage this person, but this person is not my father, nor am I his kid. And so if you can be present in your reactions as to how you manage others and how you help others through their mental struggles, I think makes a huge difference. So self-reflection here really is very important. So that is the extent of the slides that I wanted to share with you guys. I spoke as fast as possible so that we would get through them, and I'm eager for some exchange and conversation. So thank you for those of you who had shared questions before. I'm going to put them in the chat, and then we can also go through those if that is of interest. So I'll start with the ones from the chat. How do Harvard students maintain their mental health under great pressure? So that's an excellent question. This is a little bit related to the pathology argument of athletes, which is neurotic kids get into excellent schools. And when things do not go the way that they want, then it's very difficult for them to adjust. So Harvard knows that highly achieving kids need a lot of support. And I think a lot of universities have been a lot better at providing support. I think teachers also have been more willing, especially in the pandemic, to be more vulnerable and to sort of share struggles. I am not on the undergrad side, I am at the business school, but I know that on our side, the university has invested tremendously in providing support. Also last year, as part of racial equity initiatives, the connection to racism and mental health is very strong. And so the school has been very intent in creating a workplace where, people felt supported on many, many dimensions. Connection to mental health and creativity. So based on innovation. So when you think of, the other thing that has happened is that we are now in a cognitive workplace. And for innovation to occur, for creativity to occur, the mind has to have a space to do just that, which is to think and not be preoccupied about, a concern, a worry, am I not good enough? Why am I keeping to having these repetitive thoughts? If you have repetitive thoughts, they're going to crowd out all the other thoughts. If you're incapable of focusing, then it's going to be very difficult to engage in the kind of focus that leads to breakthrough development, or the kind of focus that enables you to really brainstorm with someone. And so silencing these voices in our heads, I think, are absolutely fundamental to creativity in the workplace. I hope that I've given you some ideas about how to support those connections and to try to take care of yourself and others. How do behavioral economics intersect with the field of mental health and business? So that's a really interesting point. I think we've seen behavioral economics deployed, for example, to compliance. So one of the big issues in health in general and also in mental health is, low patient compliance. So are there things that you can do, sort of reminders, even on the phone to get people to take their medications, or that's what apps are for and bots are good for, which is, hey, how are you doing today, and all of that. So I think we're going into also more of the nudge side of behavioral economics here. And I think it also relates to, if you have cognitive impairment, you're going to behave very differently. So for example, if you are unable to take care of your health, then you might be making worse decisions on the health side, or making worse investment decisions. So that would be a connecting that I would say there. Suggestion for creating mental health outlets and sustainability in companies. So I hopefully I've answered that question. If you did answer that question and I did not, please let me know. And we'll go backwards to what can you do to, yes, thank you for echoing that. I think there's really a lot more than we think we can do. There is a systemic issue, but systems are created by people. Another way that I think your generation really will save us is, I never saw the light of day when I was young. I didn't take maternity leave. And looking back, I think that was really stupid. And so now when I hire research associates and they tell me that work-life balance is very important to them, that family life is very important to them, I salute them. I salute you. I think you will make the world really, really better. And this is something that you can do. And then Lexi, are you on? I don't know if Lexi is on the call. So KPIs for mental health. So that's extremely interesting. So there are questionnaires that are used by healthcare providers, which I assume you know, Lexi, that you can have people sort of fill out and then fill out repeatedly. I think one of the very, very big challenges here is that to define what it is that you're looking for. So you'll have to figure out for that particular organization what you think will drive mental health or well-being. So I mentioned earlier that often employers and employees will disagree on what these sources of stress are. So I think if I were looking for KPIs, I might actually start with the employees and sort of ask them, what are the real levels of stress? What could we do to make it less, so that they can help you or help your clients develop a dashboard or a balanced scorecard that is as close as possible to their needs. And please, anybody chime in if you have better ideas. Okay. What should we pursue if not happiness? I think we should pursue, so I don't think we should do anything. I'm not a big fan of the imperative should. I think we could work harder to pursue peace. I think we could work harder to pursue settling. And I mean by settling, not, I'm going to give up on anything, but to accept the person that you're with, to accept the person that you are, to understand that, life is tough, but so are you. I think you should pursue the possibility to make a positive difference in yourself and others. And from there will come happiness. Joy, what do you think? It's an excellent question. I think you're on mute.
I think the team needs to unmute Joy.
Okay. Yeah, I've thought about this too, and I feel like happiness is pretty much like a cause and effect, like a chain reaction, where maybe if I eat a slice of pizza, then it makes me happy. So I think it's pretty easy to achieve, but like you said, peace and like mental well-being are more elusive, and I'm not sure if it's entirely up to us, like how we get to that kind of peace. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm Catholic, and give me peace is sort of the central. I mean, humans have been struggling for peace since the beginning of time. I think what we have going for us is that now we have more understanding of the brain. So you mentioned eating a slice of pizza, so first, pizza is good, but second, carbs your brain likes it, the dopamine likes it, it increases your serotonin, and it's very good in the moment. And the brain wires us to seek these rewards. I think a challenge in our modern day is that it used to be difficult to have a slice of pizza. It used to be difficult to have attention and have somebody sort of react on your post or post on Instagram. And now the reward loop is so rapid that we have accustomed our brain to so much sort of dopamine and reward that it's making us increasingly anxious, because now you're like rats seeking more dopamine. So one advice maybe, before you eat the slice of pizza or before you pick up your phone to self-soothe, is to ask yourself, why are you engaging in this behavior? Do you really want to see what, I post on Instagram? So are you going towards, which is what am I doing? Or are you going away from, which is I'm bored, I'm in pain, I'm anxious? And then just spend a couple of seconds sort of acknowledging, so why am I bored or why am I anxious? And then you're back to, these emotions as data. So maybe something to pursue is taking a few seconds between what you want versus what you're running from. So I'm going to say that we should pursue a little bit of time, which I hadn't thought of until you asked the question. So I'm immensely grateful to you. Thank you. Growth mindset, my favorite term, that and agile. So actually, Tom Bilyeu, if you're interested in this, Rebecca, you'll like some of his stuff and his guests. Absolutely. So I think what some of his guests are the argument that they're trying to make is that we usually think that we will only get a reward at the end. So a lot of us think if we get that degree, it's going to be the end all be all. But a growth mindset is to say, the act of my trying to get the degree is really the valuable part here. So if you can acclimate back to, what are my little steps and my in-between rewards, then you will have a more sustained path to the long-term reward. Does this answer your question, Rebecca?
Actually, maybe the team could.
We can also unmute everyone. It might be easier.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Any other questions from anyone? And also, as I mentioned, I'm, I told this to show I'm very shy. I'm a writer. I do a lot better one-on-one. So please reach out to me. There's a lot of materials. We write a lot. And I'm very happy to help anyone who really needs help on anything, or if you're considering, investing in a company or some data on startups, something like that. Please consider me your resource.
Thank you for that. That is so helpful. I don't know if it's possible for the team to unmute folks. So anyone who has a question, they can just raise their hand or unmute themselves and ask that question. We have a question.
Great.
Can we help unmute William, please? There we go.
Hi, thanks for
turning
being
on your
here.
video.
Yeah, I turned it on. Can you see me?
How are you doing? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for being here. My question is as the world of technology, information technology gets better, we become one, right? The community seems smaller. And you mentioned that, people can get lost with this whole Instagram post, TikTok. You see your friends doing really happy and it may be artificial. We don't know. Do you think we should have education or some more education about how you can be mentally sane, mentally feel good? Do we think we need to promote those things at school and everywhere? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Thank you for being here. So yes, so I think there's a lot that we can do. One of the central points also that I didn't talk about is physical health. So, whether or not we like it, we are primates. And, banning recess in schools, for example, is absolutely a disaster, especially for kids who do skew anxious, so children who may be in marginalized communities. So I would push a lot more physical development, more, infrastructures, parks, all of that. I think building more sustainable cities. So taking care of your physical health is very much related to your mental health. But I think also what Joy sort of led us to, which is when you are embarking on something, really ask yourself why you're doing it. And I had a long conversation with my daughter last year who posts a fair bit, and she's very passionate. And I said, before you post, ask yourself, do you really want to make the world a better place? Or do you want people to think that you are cool, that you're involved, that, are you playing to an audience that may not be your heart's audience? And I think if you can try to be as authentic and stay as closely connected to your values, if sometimes it means I'm not going to be on social media, if sometimes it means telling a friend, I really don't feel like going to your party, that's okay. The more sort of authentic we can be and honest with ourselves. But this field has been here since the beginning of time, and it's not going to go away. I think we can just learn to manage it a little bit better. Does this help you at all, William?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mental health as a business. Yes, so that's a fantastic question. I think it's related to, I think Lexi's question about the edutech. So can you show that this actually works? So I think, if I were an investor, first I would make sure that it's scientifically based, because you are dealing with people's lives. So there's one thing for me to sell you, a dog walking app or something. I think if I were investing in a healthcare startup, are the motives really, is the team really committed to this space? Does the team have experience in the space? Do they understand that how it matters? How will they make trade-offs between serving the patient versus serving investors? And I think if you can differentiate yourself this way to the investor, I think that would be one way. What are the metrics that you're going to be tracking? And this relates back to my comment about verticals. So are you clear about the segments that you're going to be going into? Are you clear about how these segments will sort of inform each other? So for example, if you're developing an app that is for senior citizens, what do they have in common maybe for neurodiverse individuals? Or what do they have in common maybe with persons with disabilities? Sort of think about markets beyond the core market. Is there a logical exit, of course, which is always a question that investors will ask. What is that exit? So is it to a bigger provider, or like a Ginger who might buy you out? Is it to something like a Fitbit, the wearables also? More relevant, what differentiators will investors be looking for in mental health? Yeah, I think really, does it work? I mean, I think at some point this is going to come down to that.
Awesome. I think we have some time for one last question. If anyone has burning questions.
Lisa, did that answer your question? Are you thinking of that field for yourself? Or?
No, I have a friend who is starting a startup, mental health startup of her own, and she asked me to share the recording of this. So I thought I'd ask that question for her.
Oh yeah. How about you reach out to me? We just wrote a whole note on especially telehealth and mental health startups.
Sweet. Oh, we have a question from Jean.
Hi, Jean. I found that my workmates are not happy.
I found some of them.
Oh, Jean, do you want to unmute and tell me a little bit more? We met online, I believe. Oh, is she gone? Oh no, there she is. Is everybody unmuted or?
I can't.
You muted everyone again.
There we go.
Hi, and good morning. So maybe I'll take a. Jean, would you like to speak? So some of my workmates are not happy. So I'm going to say that most of us are not happy at this stage of the pandemic. I think you really have to be a little psychopathic or something to be there for a year ago. I think acknowledging that people are frustrated is important. But I am in the, okay. You're wondering how to, so I think, you can reach out. So I think it's okay to take it upon yourself as responsibility to reach out and ask, and to encourage them to take care of themselves, to ask them, what is it that I can do to, help you? What is it that I can stop doing? Because often it's, things that we are doing or not doing. But at the end of the day, it is not your responsibility nor your capacity to change someone's state. I think it is your responsibility to try. Of course, if you think that anybody, has suicidal ideations, you can share resources. You can encourage them to reach out to HR depending on the organization that you work in. But sadness and is contagious, and so I think we're all in this stage at this moment. And I'm sorry that you're in this situation, and I hope that you keep up your spirit, because your teammates will see that, and that may be the best way to help them, to remind them that we will get through this and we will rebuild.
And if we have a minute, I have a question, if it's okay.
Please. Yes, and I'm happy to stay. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I actually really love your last slide in terms of self-diagnoses, based off of which animal. Are there different recommendations that you would give for different types of people in the workplace? And then the second chunk to this is, now that we're all working digitally, for example, in person, I love giving everyone hugs, and I miss giving people hugs. I think that makes a big difference, right?
Yes. Yes.
Whereas now that all team meetings are done online, are there any specific advice that you would share that we could do as a team for team bonding and wellness together?
Yeah. So I think what I would suggest is, so there's a reflection with all the pros and cons of all the type, whether the impact at the individual, team, and community levels. So I can append that to the slides, and then we can send them out to everyone, if that would be okay. And then you can do your own reflection and sort of go through. Is that okay? And then I'll focus on the second one.
That'd be great.
So yes, hugs. I mean, back to William's question, and I mean, we are primates. This is the other way that the pandemic has been a disaster, because this is how we get through life, and not being able to touch. So my team and I play a game once a week. It's a silly game, but we have lunch while doing it. You have the same sort of competitive behaviors. I think companies are doing online cooking. We talked about online painting. I think the more, we've gone into a low touch world calls for high touch management. So if you are a manager, reach out a little bit more. If you're a friend, reach out a little bit more. I think there's no substitute for the human body. Thank God. But you can stay connected. I hear of people holding office hours also, just so that, to give the sense that people can walk into your space anytime. So faculty used to do that, but now a lot of managers do that, do competitions, pie days coming out. Can you bake at home and show your pie? Sort of be a little bit more creative. So, we talked about creativity, maybe ways that people can exchange in different ways. But yeah, I miss the physical world a lot too. But we're getting back there. So we're getting back there. So maybe one of you will come visit me at HBS one of these days, and show you guys the campus and give you guys a big hug.
That'd be amazing. And actually, a really quick follow-up, you mentioned creative experiments. I'm curious, in the research space, what are some of the most creative or innovative areas of research within the mental health space right now?
So I'm not sure creative is the term, but I think all the investigation of psychedelics is really, really cool. I'm not a drug taker, I barely drink. But I think sort of thinking about what are the possibilities of the mind that can be unlocked that we don't know about, different treatments for depression. So I think innovation, maybe more than, you don't want to be too creative in the treatment sphere, but I think innovation is great. And on the creativity space, I do think, this art therapy has a lot of promise. And it's something that you can do at home, but it is something that connects you to the physical world. So I'm quite optimistic about that. I have a friend who works with music also, which is a form of, there's several brain waves depending on our level of consciousness, and he sort of operates above the sleeping level, that he can unleash, reflections or, so I think there's a lot of experimentation happening, and we're more willing to experiment. I think we're more willing to bring some of this into the mainstream than we were before COVID.
Yeah, I asked that because I see a bunch of smaller experiments happening. So Karen, you might already know this. There is this thing, maybe some of the other folks on the call now has used it before. It's called window swap, where you can go online and you can share your window, what your view looks like outside, and you can open it up to see someone else's window anywhere else in the world. And so that was actually quite therapeutic for me when I just got tired of the same view and I could
Yeah,
open up a window somewhere else in the world. That was quite cool, actually.
that is cool. Yeah, yeah. Also, you mean like ideas ideas on Zoom or different things? Yeah, yeah. I think virtual reality is interesting. Also, you're seeing people sort of operating in virtual offices. So many different ways. You know, we're innovating. So.
With that, I'll pass it back to Melissa.
Thanks. I think this marks the end of tonight's session. We're just a little bit over the hour, so thanks for staying a little bit longer with us, Karen.
Of course.
And I also want to thank the everyone who joined in and asked really great questions. And so we hope you enjoyed the session tonight and have huge takeaways from Karen's sharing. I know I've really enjoyed learning more about the evolution of mental health. Before the pandemic to now, industry insights in mental health, and also just like practical advice and tips for self-care and self-awareness as we progress through our days here. And also we'll also be uploading the recording on our YouTube channel, and we'll be sending a link to everyone, so definitely subscribe and follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and other social media pages. And also check out decode.build for more content, and subscribe to discover our upcoming speakers. And then logistically, more information if you would like to volunteer with Decode on future events, please send us an email at careers@decode.build. And I want to thank Karen once again. Thank you so much for being generous with your time and your insights. And for everyone else, we hope to see you again at our next speaker event on March 24th with Google's Chief Privacy Officer. So stay tuned for more details on that. So anyways, thank you guys. Good night.
Thank you so much, guys. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye.